Captain Jeff, and I'm recording my Airline Pilot Guy Show, episode number 73, here in the beautiful Hilton Hotel in Melbourne, Florida. And this is mostly an audio podcast, as I've explained on earlier episodes of the video. And if you'd like to listen to the audio version of the podcast, which again is the priority for me, you can do that by going to airlinepilotguy.com. If you'd like to download this automatically and be able to use it on your portable devices, MP3 players, iPhones, Android phones, Blackberries, whatever, you could do that by looking for my feed. The easiest thing to do is just look for me on iTunes, and you'll find all that information on my website, airlinepilotguy.com. So, sit back and relax and watch me flail around as I record the audio version of my podcast. Here I go. So I'm going to put my cheaters on so I can see. Here we go. Airline Pilot Guy, episode number 73. Hello, you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, the view from my side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from Studio 211 at the Hilton Rialto Place in Melbourne, Florida. In this episode, a near miss in New York. The FAA has created Aviation Rulemaking Committee to help decide if they can allow more widespread use of electronic devices in today's aircraft. An engine failure and resultant rejected takeoff of an Airbus 330 in Manchester, UK. More 787 problems. Well, that and much more. So get all settled in. Tray tables and seat backs in their upright and locked positions. Electronic devices powered on. Flight 73 is ready for pushback. Well, hello and welcome back for those of you who have listened to me before, and welcome to those of you who are new to the podcast. You're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, and as I mentioned, I'm here in beautiful Melbourne, Florida, on the what do they call this? The rocket coast, the space coast. That's it. We're just down south from Cape Canaveral, Florida, where they launched the shuttles, the space shuttle program, and not too far from Orlando, a little bit inland, and it's a beautiful place. It kind of reminds me of old-time Florida, the way it used to be back in the 50s and 60s, and not quite all commercialized and everything like so many places are in the state of Florida. But anyway, it's hot, it's humid, it's Florida in the summertime. And that's why I am inside my room recording the Airline Pilot Guy Show. So, let's see, what can I tell you? Last episode I did was last week, and then when I got back from that, headed over to Southern California after watching my son's first performance of a summer stock theater play. Our Town, I believe, is the play. No, I know for sure that's what it was that they performed, and he did a great job, as well as all his friends in the theater group. And let's see, so I went out on Friday morning and came back on Monday, and had a great time. Got to see my mom's new digs, new place of where she's staying and being taken care of, and it's a beautiful place. Got to meet some nice people. Got to see my sister and spend some great time with her, and overall it was a great visit, just not long enough. Tuesday went back out on another trip, 2-day trip, and I was actually here. Tried to get a podcast recorded on Tuesday, but the early mornings and lack of sleep just got to me. So here I am again on Thursday, June, 27th, I believe. And I have a lot of things to talk about, as usual. So let's get on with it, shall we? Oh, before I do that, let's talk about the coffee fund. Boom, 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 boom. The ink spots back from 1940 something, 44, I believe. This is not copyrighted. Okay, I'm going to bring them down a little bit so I can talk over them. Just a reminder, I do have a coffee fund, and that is used for buying coffee, but other things like nice alcoholic beverages, such as this one I'm holding in my hand right now from the downstairs lobby. This is the House Cabernet. I believe it's called Shenandoah Lane. Very tasty. And of course, I'm drinking this just for medicinal purposes to keep my throat all nice and wet. Don't want to get all parched. So, anyway, the coffee fund, more importantly, is really used for much more than beverages. Boy, I thought I turned those guys down, but they're continuing to increase their volume on me. Okay, have them all the way down to almost nothing. Okay, it is also to help me defray the costs of creating the show for you. I have hosting costs for my website. I have media server costs, etc. So, anyway, if you feel compelled to donate a cup of coffee to Captain Jeff, you can do that by going over to the Airline Pilot Guy and clicking on the Buy a Cup of Coffee button. And thank you to all who did since the last show, and that would be Lee and Christian Matala. Also, I mentioned on the last show that I use several things. Actually, I have an iPad in front of me. I have my old trusty MacBook Pro in front of me. Actually, it's a borrowed MacBook Pro. And I'm trying something a little bit different using a Logitech webcam that I use when I'm recording another podcast at home. And you know me, I like to tinker with gadgets, and so I'm trying something new again. But anyway, these things cost money, and so it's very helpful when I get donations to my fund. And also, the reason why I was starting this is to mention that I use a service called Dropbox, and if you don't, you should, because it's a very handy thing to have for those crucial things you want to make sure are backed up, or those things you want to have available on more than one of your devices. Again, Dropbox, you can click on the link that I have in my show notes, and if you do that, when you sign up, you'll get, right off the bat, they give you free 2 gigabytes, and then if you use that special code to sign up, you get an extra 500 or half a gigabyte of storage, and I do too. So it's a win-win for both of us. So just thought I'd mention that, and now let's move on to the news. Yes. Well, just a few days ago, the FAA put out a fact sheet on portable electronics on airplanes for immediate release, June 21st, 2013. Anyone who has flown on a commercial airliner has heard the flight attendant tell passengers to turn off all cell phones, computers, e-readers, and other devices once the cabin door is closed, and leave them off until the plane reaches 10,000 feet. The FAA recognizes that this is an area of intense consumer interest, so the agency has brought all the important stakeholders together to facilitate a discussion on this issue. A government industry group is now studying the current policies and procedures aircraft operators use to determine when these portable electronic devices can be used safely during flight. The goal is to help air carriers and operators decide if they can allow more widespread use of electronic devices in today's aircraft. The group, called an Aviation Rulemaking Committee, is examining a variety of issues, including the testing methods aircraft operators use to determine which new technologies passengers can safely use aboard aircraft and when they can use them. They're also looking at technological standards associated with the use of PEDs, personal electronic devices, during any phase of flight. The group began its business in January and will hold periodic meetings through September, after which, this year, it will give its report and recommendations to the FAA. They put a note in here. The group is not considering the use of cell phones for voice communications during flight because the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, regulations prohibit any airborne calls using cell phones. And really the reason for that is that that would really stress the cell phone antenna, cell phone networks. If a device or several devices are connected and traveling through space at a very high rate of speed, and the handoffs which might be involved. And you know what? The other thing that I think is not stated here, but I think I should mention, is that anytime you get above, I don't know, 5,000 feet or so, it's very, very rare if you can actually get a cell phone signal. Somebody told me. I don't know that for sure. But I'm pretty darn sure that once you get above 10,000 feet, you're not going to get a signal from a ground-based cell phone tower anyway. So might as well keep them off, right? So you know that many airlines now have received approval for using tablets, many of them, or most of them, iPad devices, for flight bags, electronic flight bags. You know, that they've been using those successfully, and we're going to hear from our friend Jeff later in the show during the feedback section. He's going to tell us about his experience with the iPad and electronic flight bag. And basically the FAA is saying, hey, we haven't had any problems with these, and we're not sure what's going to happen when everybody on the airplane is using them at the same time. And you know how I feel about this. I think that they're going to find that it's not a problem at all. In fact, I just mentioned earlier that I headed out to California. I non-rev, that means I didn't pay anything. I used my past travel privileges to take a 777 out there. And guess what? As usual, either when I'm non-revving or deadheading, I look around and I can count at least 5 or 6 devices or people with devices that have not shut the devices off. And I know that you could probably multiply that safely by many, many multiples. And so there are a bunch of devices in use, not turned off on an airplane. And as far as I know, no airplane has gone down yet. Now, what is that sound that I hear? Testing, testing. I'm hearing a crackling sound. Now, why is that? I don't like crackling sounds. Huh. Okay, what I'm going to do is pause the recording. And I don't know, can you hear that on the video? Okay, I'm going to pause the recording here. Video's still going. And I am going to finish this file. Okay, I'm back. Hello, video audience. And I just reviewed my video to see if you could hear the crackling noise. And yeah, I know why you didn't hear the crackling noise that I was hearing in my earbuds is because I forgot to plug in the input into my laptop, into the video recording. And so you were listening to me on my built-in laptop microphone, and you can hear me just fine, but you can't hear any of the sound effects like this.
Flight 209, you are cleared for takeoff. Roger.
That's my opening music. So you missed that, and let's see, what else did you miss? You missed this. That's a little bumper that I play for my news. I call it my news stinger. Ow. So, now I have the thing plugged in, so you should be able to hear all the sound effects. And I changed something up on my iPad, and I don't hear the crackling noise anymore. So we're going to cross our fingers. Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not superstitious. We're going to hope that everything is going to work out just fine. So I'm going to resume the audio podcast now, just as soon as I figure out what we were talking about before we last left. Oh, we were talking about the electronic devices. Okay, here we go. Okay, I'm back, and not sure what was causing the little clicking noise in my recording setup, but I think I eliminated it. And we were talking about the FAA working group that is examining the feasibility of using electronic devices on a more widespread basis aboard airplanes, and the fact that every time I'm on an airplane, I see a bunch of people using these devices, and I know that there must be at least a dozen, 24 devices on, with their transmitters on and everything else on every flight. And as far as I know, it has not brought an airplane down. So I'm all for doing this, and I hope that their conclusion at the end of the year will be the one that we're all looking for. The conclusion is, hey, it doesn't do a darn thing, so have fun with your devices. Search the internet, do everything you want to do with your device, except make those pesky phone calls. Don't bother all the other passengers around you. All right? So that's that. Now, let's look at something else. This was interesting. This happened on the 13th, a couple weeks ago, in New York. And you may have heard about this on the news. Of course, the media made a big deal about this. My first reaction was, in fact, when I went out to California, I remember my sister said, "Oh, did you hear about the near miss?" And I went, "The what? The what?" And they said, "Oh, yeah, it involved Acme." And no, it wasn't my airline. It was another airline. It was Delta Airlines and a commuter airline, an American, I believe. And I said, "No, I didn't hear about that." And so I looked it up and found some audio. But before I play the audio, let me do this. Let me set this up. There was an American Airlines Boeing 737-800 performing Flight 1786 from Tampa to New York, John F. Kennedy. They were on final approach to John F. Kennedy's runway 4 right, and they went around. I'm not sure why they went around. I think it was because the airplane ahead of them hadn't cleared, and so we've talked about this before. We can't land if the airplane that preceded us is still on the runway. So they go around, and then a Delta Airlines Boeing 747-400 performing Flight 172 from Tokyo to John F. Kennedy. They were on final approach to runway 4 left, and they also announced their go-around. Now, again, I'm not sure why the 747 went around. It's not very clear in the audio why that happened, but they made the decision to go around. So now you have an American 737 going around on the 4 right, and you have a 747 on 4 left performing a go-around. And also, we have another big New York airport, LaGuardia, to the north of Kennedy, that has departures departing runway 13, which is a 130 heading and then turning right and staying away from John F. Kennedy's departures. But we have a situation where we have somebody or an airplane or flight going around the 747, and they're kind of ending up heading into the same flight path as a regional carrier off of LaGuardia's 13. So it was a Shuttle America Embraer ERJ 170 that was involved off of LaGuardia. And let's see, that flight, the Shuttle America flight performing Flight 5981, departed LaGuardia's runway 13, handed off to departure when departure control instructed the aircraft to expedite the climb through 3,000 feet and make an immediate left turn to heading 040. The aircraft subsequently was turned onto heading 270 and was instructed to expedite climb through 5,000 feet. The crew subsequently inquired about the other traffic. LaGuardia departure reported the traffic had been a go-around at John F. Kennedy, and had been turned to where it should not have been at 2,000 feet. The crew commented that the other traffic had come pretty close. Interestingly, though, neither crew reported a TCAS resolution advisory. And then all aircraft continued for safe landings at their intended destinations. So let's listen to some of the audio so we can hear kind of what happened here. So let's start with the traffic doing the go-arounds at JFK.
Okay, Tower American 1786, switch for 4 right.
American 1786, Kennedy Tower, runway 4 right. The wind is 110 at 19, clear the land.
Land 4 right, American 1786, thanks.
Delta 172 heavy, wind 110 at 19er, heavy 777's on the roll, runway 4 left, clear to land.
Clear to land 4 left, Delta 172 heavy.
Okay, the American flights.
Tower American 1786 going around.
American 1786, turn right now, heading 130. Turn right now, heading 130.
Right, 130, American 1786.
Okay, no problem.
Runway heading up to 3,000.
That's the Delta 747.
So 172 heavy, turn left now, heading 250, maintain 2,000.
Okay, 250 and 2,000, Delta 172. 2,000, American 1786.
American 1786, turn right, heading 150.
150, American 1786.
Turn right, heading 040 again.
040, Delta 172.
So 172 heavy, able the best right turn. Best right turn, you're able.
Okay, we're turning right to 040, Delta 172.
So 172 heavy, you turning?
Yes, sir. We're almost at 040 now.
Delta 172 heavy, traffic, 12 o'clock, 1,400 feet, Embraer, 1,600 feet.
Okay, we got him on the fish finder here.
Okay, he's eastbound at 1,800 feet, climbing out of his vest.
Okay, we're turning right to 060. American 1786.
American 1786, I'm still here, sir, stand by.
All right.
Delta 172.
Heading 180, we're heading 060, we're at 2,000 feet, Delta 172. Where you want us, sir?
Delta 172 heavy, affirmative, right to 180 at 2,000.
Okay, right turn to 180, 2,000, Delta 172 heavy.
American 1786, stand by for further instructions. Okay.
Okay, so that's
American 1786, contact approach on
the recording involving the traffic at JFK. You could tell that initially there wasn't a lot of concern, it seems, for the 747. They gave them instructions to turn to a heading of 040. Apparently, they weren't rapidly turning, aggressively turning to 040, and that's when you could kind of tell the excitement in the controller's voice that there was the Embraer traffic climbing through 1,400, and before he even ended his sentence, through 1,600, then 1,800, and it turns out that that was a separation that they had. The Delta flight was at 2,000 feet, and the Embraer, the Shuttle America, was at 1,800 feet at their closest point, so only 200-foot vertical clearance. And I think the offset was a half a mile, 0.5 nautical miles. That, folks, was very close. And remember, at first I thought that this was just one of those overblown situations where the media was making a big thing about a couple of airplanes that got within a couple miles of each other, but this was much, much closer. It could have been quite a disaster. Let's play the LaGuardia ATC recording of the Shuttle America flight.
Roger, good afternoon, Mercury 59, 81, 700 for 5,000.
Mercury 59, 81, New York, radar contact, and climb and maintain 10,000, next flight you climb through 3.
All right, 10,000, expedite to 3,000, Mercury 59, 81.
Mercury 59, 81, turn left heading 040, immediate left turn.
All right, left 040, Mercury 59, 81. What was the heading for Mercury 59, 81?
Turn left to 270, climb and maintain 12,000.
Left 270, 12,000, Mercury 5981.
Mercury 5981, expedite, you're flying through 5 now.
Expedite through 5, Mercury 5981.
Did you ever see that guy?
No, we were IMC the whole time.
Roger.
Yeah, but
Kennedy, I'm not sure why he was there at 2,000.
Departure Mercury 5981. You said he came from Kennedy?
Yeah, I think he was a go-around, or I'm not sure what he was, but yeah, not sure why he turned right or anything when he should not have been there at 2,000.
Okay, yeah, it got close.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Mercury is the call sign for Shuttle America Flight 5981. He said he was IMC. That's an abbreviation that we use for Instrument Meteorological Conditions, or you're in the soup. You can't see anything. And so he never saw the traffic, the conflicting traffic, but he probably saw the conflicting traffic on the Traffic Collision Avoidance System, the TCAS. And the LaGuardia controller is a little perplexed as to why the go-around traffic off of JFK was heading that direction. Perhaps it was a mistake by the controllers at JFK to send the 747 04 left around to the right. Perhaps they should have told them to go to the left and continue to the left. Maybe they got confused because they have two airplanes at the same time executing go-around procedures, and maybe when they said the Delta flight 172 turn right heading 040, maybe they meant the American flight. I don't know. Not sure. I wasn't there. But anyway, it was a very close call, and hopefully they will learn something about that. And I'm supposing that the situation that occurred here is not something that they ever dreamed would happen. You know, they probably have contingencies for one of the parallel runways executing a go-around procedure, but not both. So very interesting one. So I'm glad that no collisions occurred and everybody is relatively happy. Let's get on with this. Several of you sent links to this, and it just happened on Monday of this week. Thomas Cook out of the UK, an Airbus 330 was taking off from Manchester, and they executed a rejected takeoff because they had a very large bang from their right-hand engine, and apparently it was some kind of an aggravated compressor stall or just a plain old engine failure, or both. Maybe the compressor stall, severe compressor stall, ended up failing the engine. Whatever it was impressive. And the reason why we know it's impressive is that we actually have some video footage, and I'll put a link in the show notes to this, again from the Aviation Herald site, and he has linked to two separate videos of some plane spotters hanging out at the airports and taking pictures and video and logging tail numbers and all that kind of thing. And they, let's see, I think the guy's name was Simon Lowe, got a head-on view of the airplane taking off on the runway. And I'm not sure what runway it was right now. I can't think of the designation of the runway, but it doesn't matter. And but it's head-on, and you see this big Airbus 330 rolling down the runway toward you. And I'm so glad we get to see this vantage point, because we practice this kind of thing in the simulator, an engine failure prior to V1 or decision speed. And this airplane was clearly in the high-speed realm, takeoff realm, and for most airlines that's above 80 knots. And I don't know exactly how fast this Airbus was going, but it was probably a good 10, 12 seconds into its roll, maybe more, when the compressor stall or the engine failure occurred. And you can see some flames coming out of the front of the engine, actually probably coming out of the back, but you can kind of see it through the engine because you have a head-on view of this thing. And then you see kind of a puff of smoke back there, and then immediately you see the airplane kind of veer to the right because, of course, it's lost power on the right side. And then almost immediately, and I'm impressed with this, almost immediately, the rudder on the tail of the airplane almost goes to full deflection. So immediately the pilot at the controls recognized the loss of power and the fact that the airplane was starting to head one way because of the loss of power on the right side, and countered it with almost full rudder, maybe full rudder. You can see the big rudder deflecting, and to keep it going straight down the runway. And then you can see the reversers popping out of both engines, and from that angle you can see it slowing down and stopping. And then, of course, the other angle was more of a side view, and again you can see more clearly the explosion, the flames coming out the back. And then you can also see in that view a lot of the brake smoke, because you have this very, very heavy airplane. I think they were going from Manchester to Punta Cana, Dominican Republic. So that's a long flight, a lot of passengers, a lot of fuel. And so it was very impressive to see this. Job well done by the Thomas Cook crew. And my hat's off. My pilot's hat is off to these pilots and the way they handled the situation. And thank you, plane spotters, as well. It's great that you had this footage so we could see a real high-speed rejected takeoff due to engine failure. Okay, I put this thing on pause again. Now, those of you on the video, can you hear that crackling? I can, and I don't like it. Bothers me. I think it might have something to do with, although it didn't do that before, but I think it might have something to do with my USB. So, what I'm going to do is pause the video again. I've already paused the audio. And I'm going to reset my USB interface and see if that helps. So let me go over here to this, and I'll be right back. Okay, back again. We're going to resume recording. Okay, now it's on to the best part of the show, your feedback.
Captain, incoming message.
Okay, now, Sam, I know you sent this in a long, long time ago, but I'm finally getting to your feedback, and thanks for being patient. Hey, Captain Jeff. First of all, I love the show. I only just discovered it, but I'm already making my way through the older episodes. Anyway, I have a question regarding the landing characteristics of the 727. I read somewhere that due to the position of the center of pressure, you can actually rescue a poor flare by using some nose down. Have you ever heard of this? I understand that this is an absolute no-no in flying ordinarily. Anyway, Jeff, great show as always, and hello from Ireland. Best regards, Sam. Well, thanks, Sam. Great question, by the way. And when the 727 was originally designed by Boeing, it was shorter. And so the wheelbase, the distance from the main landing gear to the nose wheel, was decent. It wasn't too long. When they decided to make a longer version of the airplane, as they do with most airplanes, the 200 model, they put a plug of, 10 feet. I don't know how much, but they extended the length of the airplane. And that ended up shifting the wing and the main landing gear further back. So the distance between the nose wheel and the main landing gear increased. And more importantly, the relationship to where the center of lift and the center of gravity was all altered because the landing gear is further back in that moment arm. So what that means is, as you're coming in for landing, you get to a certain point where you start to flare, and of course that's naturally going to kind of pivot the main landing gear a little bit further down or a little bit lower. And then if you get to a point where if you increase it anymore, you're actually going to basically throw the main landing gear or force it or push it into the runway. resulting in a not so pleasant touchdown. So when you're in that situation and you can judge it, and you've been there before, and you're pretty sure about how it's going to work, you can actually push forward a little bit on the control yoke and decrease the angle, the deck angle of the airplane, and lower the nose a little bit, and that kind of pivots the main landing gear up a little bit, and that sometimes cushions the impact before you touch down. You have to be careful, though, as you mentioned in your email. That's quite a no-no for most airplanes, and yeah, you have to be careful when you do that, because you could overdo it and end up hitting the nose wheel first and do what we call wheelbarrowing down the runway, and that's never a good thing. And the same characteristic of the 727-200 model is also applicable to the airplane that I fly now, the MD-88 and the MD-90. Again, both of these airplanes are pretty stretched. They have a very long wheelbase between the nose wheel and the main landing gear. And it's not quite as pronounced a problem with the MD-80 and 90 series, but it is a factor. And you can get in that same condition where you know that if you pull back any more in your flare, you're going to end up, basically throwing the main landing gear down pretty hard on the runway, and it's going to result in a bad landing. You can kind of actually relieve some of the pressure and almost push forward a little bit. It's almost imperceptible, and come up with a pretty nice landing. I remember in the early days flying with a captain for the first time. He had been with Eastern Airlines. They flew the 727-200 model. And I was a co-pilot, and he said to me in his briefing, I hope this doesn't startle you. Now, that's never a good sign when you're a first officer and the captain says, I'm going to do something during the landing, and I hope this doesn't make you feel too uncomfortable or it doesn't startle you. And you never really want to hear those words from a captain. And he said, this is what I'm going to do, and this is my technique of landing the 727. And basically, he gets down to the point where you start your flare, where most people start their flares, and he actually pushes forward. And he said that he gets pretty consistently good landings that way, and he did. The few landings that I experienced with him were actually pretty good landings, but he had done it so many times over the years of flying that airplane that he knew exactly at what point to do it. What he was doing was he was kind of taking advantage of something called ground effect. As the wings get closer to the ground, there's almost a cushion of air that is a factor as well that can help you kind of cushion the blow of the landing gear, the wheels hitting the runway. I never did that technique. That was always too, you make one little miscalculation with that, and you could really end up, having a really bad landing, like an over G kind of heavy or hard landing kind of thing where they have to do an inspection on the airplane. So I never used that technique myself, but so that is true, Sam, that the 727, the 200, not the Dash 1 or the Dash 100, the first model, that landed like any other airplane. You could flare it, and if you needed to flare a little bit more, no problem, because the main landing gear, the wheels were closer to the center of lift or center of gravity, whatever that area, that pivot point on the longitudinal axis of the airplane. So again, great question, Sam. I had to take a little sip of my wine. Okay, Rob writes, please see this YouTube link. And he gives me a link. I would have thought a 777 needs a large portion of the runway length to take off. I would also have thought that if you stop on the runway on takeoff, there is a procedure to start over or something, and lots of paperwork explaining what happened. Thoughts? Thanks, Rob. Yes, Rob, you are right. I looked at your link. I'll include that link in the show notes. You need to look at this. It's let's see, what was why can't I think of it was a Chinese, based in Hong Kong. Can't remember the name, but you'll see it when you watch the YouTube video. Don't send me an email feedback saying, it was this, you idiot. Oh, Cathay Pacific, that's it. I figured it out myself. It was a Cathay Pacific 777 starting its takeoff roll in Hong Kong, and the engines are spooling up. It's actually accelerating pretty well. And then all of a sudden you can hear the engines throttle back and it come to a slow stop. And then it doesn't exit the runway or anything. You hear the engine starting to spool up again and it continues to take off. Maybe you can do that in Hong Kong or international places, but I can tell you what, if you do that here in this country, you're going to have some splaining to do because you essentially rejected a takeoff. And you can't, I mean, I don't know what their company policy is, but the company that I fly for, Acme, would say, no, oh, no, you didn't. You know, you can't do that. If you reject a takeoff, you need to pull off the runway and start thinking about some things like brake energy. Go to the brake energy charts and see if you need to do some cooling of the brakes. You need to do some, figure out why is it that you rejected the takeoff and, do some cleanup items, an after landing checklist, and then maybe a before takeoff checklist again. It's not like you can just go out there and stop and then start again. Now, maybe in your Cessna 172 or your Mooney or whatever, that's fine. Stop and goes and that kind of thing, that's not uncommon. But when we're flying an airliner, transport aircraft, that is a no-no. So I'm not sure how or maybe they didn't get away with it, Rob. Maybe they got in trouble for doing that maneuver. But apparently the captain decided that it wasn't a big deal and maybe nobody will notice, and applied power and took off. The length of the runway, as you mentioned, some of the runway length has been used in that initial acceleration and stopping. So I'm not even sure their takeoff data is valid from that point because they're starting another takeoff. We get in trouble if we take off from an intersection that's maybe 100 feet or 200 feet, maybe not even that much, from where your takeoff data is calculated. And if you have not modified your takeoff data, either manually using cutback procedures or requesting new data from that intersection, which is maybe 100 feet shorter than full length or 200 feet shorter or whatever, if you don't get that, you're in trouble. You're in violation of our policies and probably an FAR. So, again, very interesting video. If I were the pilot crew on that flight, and this happened a few years ago, I think I would try to take down that video if I could, because that's kind of damning, if you ask me. All right, our good friend, First Officer Jeff, writes just a short blurb about the iPad as an EFB, electronic flight bag. I kept it short so as, number one, not to overload my email, and two, not to bore your listeners. If you'd like to hear more, you can try giving me a call, or if you have a Philly layover, maybe we could meet up for a brew. First Officer Jeff. And then he sent me a follow-on email with some images of what the Jeppesen app on the iPad presents to you. And I have an iPad finally, just bought one not too long ago, and you can download the one of the many Jeppesen apps, and you can engage the demo mode without having to sign up to be a subscriber to the service. And then you can see effectively or practically how the thing works. So thank you, Jeff, for that. And let's listen to your awesome audio feedback.
Hello, Captain Jeff, First Officer Jeff. About a month or so ago, I promised you some feedback on using the iPad as an electronic kit bag. So here is the short and sweet. Short part, it's wonderful. My kit bag is now about 25 pounds lighter. I've been using the system now for about 6 weeks on several legs, numerous legs actually, domestic and international. It does make things very simple. You can customize the setup any way you like. Bottom line is there's an app on the iPad built by Jeppesen, filled by Jeppesen with their up-to-date publications. You just download the information over a Wi-Fi connection. And depending on the speed, it can take anywhere from 5 minutes to 30 minutes. I've seen actually an hour, depending on one with a real slow one. But updates are very simple. sorting things out is also very simple. It replaces volumes of material that you carry in your kit bag. There are no more charts that you have to carry around. You do have to carry your maps, your high charts, your low charts, the local area charts. The approach plates, the departure plates, the arrival plates, the airport diagrams, all those are included in Jepson's, and you can sort them in the order that you're going to use them. So the first page that displays will be your gate, the second page will be the airport, the third page will be the departure procedure, the next page that you pull up will be the other airport, and it'll be the arrival procedure, followed by the runway that you're landing on, followed by the airport diagram, then the parking gates at your next airport. So you can do things very easily. It's also, the best benefit is that you can expand the size. You can blow up any portion of any chart. So all those tiny little notes that are always so difficult to see, especially at night, come out at you. You can see them. You can make them the biggest font you want. So bottom line, it's a wonderful system. I love having it. I took like 25 pounds of stuff out of my kit bag, which is now mostly personal gear instead of company gear. So that's the short and sweet. You should be looking forward to it. It's a wonderful thing. And electronic devices in the cockpit are on and operating. Take care and God bless.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for that great review. And I hope to soon be experiencing the same elation that you are. Although, as I mentioned before, the company, Acme, they decided to go with a different vendor, not Apple. That's the rumor anyway. And I hope that the solution is as elegant as the one with which you are experiencing. I noticed, I was reading some company literature today, and they said that the 757, 767 fleet at Acme are going to be issued the tablet devices first, starting I think sometime next year. So we're not quite there. I did also read, I think just today or yesterday, that the FAA has approved the use of electronic flight bags for JetBlue in all phases of flight. And related to this, Nash in Hong Kong writes to me, "Thanks for providing the view from your side of the cockpit door. Would like to compliment you for sharing some of your private life with us. Hope your mom is well and keeping in good health." Thank you. And yes, she is. She's doing just fine with her Parkinson's disease. And thank you for asking, Nash. My question today is regarding the use of iPads in, quote, all phases of a flight. Despite the advantages of an iPad, I was wondering if it's a good idea for its use in the cockpit instead of the traditional pilot book containing the maps and charts, etc. Question 1. Don't you think there's a danger when there's severe turbulence? It can be difficult to see the details on the screen. Also, considering that the touch screen responds to very light inputs, there would be a danger of the correct screen being displayed at all times, even if you're used to using the screen lock button. And number 2, what happens if the iPad was subjected to a hard fall due to the turbulence, resulting in a cracked screen, or if it simply shuts off due to the impact? We'll appreciate your comments. As always, wishing you the best of flying conditions. Regards, Nash in Hong Kong. Well, thanks, Nash, and the same wish for you as well. And great questions that you ask. And not only did Jeff give us a little idea of how the whole thing works, didn't really address these questions in particular, but I had the same questions. And I asked a jump seat rider that I had a couple of weeks ago from Miami to Atlanta, and he is an American pilot, and he was explaining to us a little bit more of the details of how the whole system works. Now, you'll know, or you'll remember that all of the pilots have been issued iPads at American Airlines, and so they're in use in all of the fleets. And he said that there's some kind of a mounting device that you put this iPad in a special holder that has a mounting device, and apparently this mounting device holds it very, very securely. So they've really thought this out. It's something. The mount is actually installed in basically a permanent way in the airplane, so it's affixed to the airplane itself, and then the holder interface with the iPad is a very secure one. Okay, well, let's say that due to operator error, it's not placed on there exactly right, or the turbulence is so severe that it's dropped. Well, number one, if it drops and the screen is cracked, I think many of you out there have experienced a cracked smartphone screen or tablet screen. You can still use the device. It's not very pretty, but you can still use it, number one. Number two, remember that each of the pilots in the cockpit has an iPad or a tablet device. So if one of them breaks, there's still one other. Number three, if both of them somehow break, you still have the radio, and you can say, hey, can you please give us the course information, the frequency information, etc. There are people out there that can help on the radio. Okay, so it's not like you're alone out there. So there are three reasons why, even if it did take a hard fall due to turbulence or crack the screen or just simply shuts down, not a problem. Also, this guy that was on our jump seat said that they're required to carry a battery, an external battery device to use to plug in to supply more battery power, just in case the battery that's already installed in the iPad fails because it wasn't charged properly or whatever. The other thing you mentioned was in the turbulence scenario where you hit severe turbulence and it's shaking so much you can't really see it. Well, that would be the same situation if you had paper plates. I mean, the paper charts are going to be just as hard to read as the chart that you're seeing electronically. And what else? Oh, if it's severe turbulence, you're going to have trouble even seeing your EFIS screens, your primary flight display and your navigation display. So, if you're at the point where you can't, the turbulence is so bad that you can't really read what's on your iPad screen, you're probably basically holding on for dear life and trying to keep the wings level and the airplane straight up and down and not upside down at that point. And then when you're out of the turbulence, then you can collect your thoughts and carry on. So good questions, Nash, and I'm sure that these are things that the FAA has thought through and the airlines using these solutions have thought through as well. And apparently it's not a problem. So if there's any more news regarding that sort of thing, we'll definitely talk about it in a future Airline Pilot Guy show. Okay, Oliver writes, and he's over across the pond somewhere. I forgot exactly where he is. If he's in the UK or if he is in Germany. I'm sorry, Oliver. I don't have that on my screen in front of me. But anyway, he flies the Airbus 320 family, and we had a question on an earlier episode about the side stick controllers and the tillers, the nose wheel steering tillers, and he came to my rescue to help me answer the question. He said, just some feedback for some Airbus questions that were in the podcast. First, on the 320 family, we have tillers on both sides, so we taxi and fly from both sides. As for the centerline taxiing, between our two navigational screens, the primary flight display and the nav display, there is a gap. And whatever side you sit on, if you put this gap over the center line, you taxi quite straight and avoid any parallax error. As for the transition from right-hand stick to left-hand stick, as you mentioned, the transition is fairly quick. In my company, for example, you get a 4-hour sim session in which you do some manual flying in circuits, about an hour before you start practicing emergencies from the left. So fairly quick, and then I think in practicality, maybe 2 months or so online before it starts to become second nature. Safe flying, Oliver. Thanks, Oliver. And by the way, I finally got a chance to ride in the cockpit of an Airbus. It was an A320, And the reason that I got a chance to do that is because when I was going back from Los Angeles to visit my mom and my sister, I decided I'd take an early morning flight on Monday because I had a trip that left early on Tuesday, and that would get me back with a 3-hour time change sometime mid-afternoon on Monday, and it'd give me a chance to, get back with my family, kind of get caught up with what is happening at home, take out the dirty clothes, repack the suitcase for the trip, that kind of thing. So I took the 6:45, not the first flight out of Los Angeles, but the second one. It was a 757, and we were somewhere, we had just leveled off at cruise altitude, I think, something near that. And the beverage service had started, and I noticed that the engines were kind of getting quiet. And then I noticed that we were kind of in a very long left-hand sweeping turn. And I thought, this doesn't feel right. And then my ears started popping, equalizing. The pressure was changing. I'm thinking, do they have a pressurization problem? Or are they descending? And then I look out the window because we're in this turn, and I noticed that the ground is looking a little bit closer than it should if we were up at cruise altitude at 35,000 or whatever, 34,000. So I'm thinking to myself, something is wrong, something is happening, we're not going to Atlanta. And about 3 to 5 minutes later, I heard a PA, and the captain got on and said, this is your captain speaking. We have a little bit of a problem, not an emergency, but our crew oxygen system, the supply that the pilot crew needs or uses for rapid decompression, loss of pressurization. Anyway, that system had somehow depleted, and there was zero pressure, no crew oxygen in the case of a rapid decompression or loss of pressurization. And that's a no-go. Once you've just determined that you don't have backup oxygen, that's critical. You need to descend, get to a lower altitude, that in case you do lose pressurization, you'll have enough partial pressure of oxygen to breathe and stay conscious. So he said, we're heading over to Las Vegas. I went, oh, great. We're going to Las Vegas. So I pulled out my cell phone, and no, I didn't do that until I got on the ground. Really, I didn't. But I was thinking, oh, you know what? We still may have been above 10,000 feet, and I did use my cell phone, the internet on my cell phone, to log on to my company's travel website to check the flights from Las Vegas to Atlanta. And as I figured, all the flights from Las Vegas to Atlanta were full or overbooked. And then I thought, I wonder about the jump seat. I would rather not fly in the jump seat because it's not comfortable, especially on long flights. But if it means it'll get me home before they fix this airplane, then maybe I should consider it. So I waited. I didn't book the jump seat right away, but I decided I would wait until they told us something when we got on the ground. It could be just a quick, let's swap out the bottles and get on our way, or it could be more involved than that. And at first they said, we're going to keep everybody on the airplane. It should be a quick fix. And then they came on and said, well, turns out it's a little bit more involved than we thought. And we're going to be on the ground for at least an hour. And we're going to go ahead and deplane the airplane. Now, when you deplane a big airplane like a 757, 100, almost 200 passengers, it's going to take some time, not only to offload, but also to onload. So I knew we were going to be there for a while. And so I got back on my iPhone and logged on to the travel site. And I booked myself one of those jump seats on the flight, an Airbus flight from Las Vegas to Atlanta. So I sat up in the front of the Airbus and got to experience what it's like to be in an Airbus in the cockpit. Now, my first impression kind of supported what I kind of had an idea about, and that is that it's a very, very electronic, a very automated airplane. That can be a good thing, that can be a bad thing. But you know how I feel about hand-flying airplanes and that kind of thing, and I was kind of seeing if these pilots would hand fly the airplane as we do in the MD-88, MD-90. And so we took off. And, first of all, before we get in the air, as we were taxiing out and we were holding short of the runway, we were 90 degrees from runway heading, the captain said to the first officer, Jim, or whatever his name was, "You have the airplane, I have the radios." And I'm thinking, oh, well, how's that going to work? I'd forgotten that, as Oliver mentions, the Airbus aircraft have steering tillers on both sides of the cockpit. And so the first officer used the throttles and used his steering tiller to taxi the airplane onto the runway and then complete the takeoff. So I thought that was interesting. We got airborne, and I was kind of looking off to the side, trying to see what kind of action the side stick controller was getting from his hand. And about 400 feet above the ground, 500 feet above the ground, whatever, he turned the autopilot on. And then the airplane was flying on the autoflight system for the entire flight until, I don't know, we were probably on a 5-mile final when he started hand flying the airplane again from that point to touchdown. I was a little disappointed, but for those of you out there who fly the Airbus, is that normal? I mean, like before you're even at 1,000 feet, before you're even basically cleaning up, the flaps and the other lift devices, you're already on the auto flight system. I just think that's kind of odd. Maybe that's just an Airbus thing. So, but it was interesting. Very comfortable airplane. It's very comfortable in the back. It's a little bit wider fuselage diameter, I think, than most narrow bodies. So when you're sitting in the back, it just feels more spacious. Number one. Number two, it's always been a solid feeling airplane. Number three, a spacious cockpit up front. Very wide, lots of room up there. Relatively quiet, although I did notice that because the wings are pretty far forward on the fuselage, and they have these high bypass fans, the same ones we use on the MD-90 that I fly, although mine are way back mounted on the tail, and you can hardly hear them. On the Airbus, you can really hear them. That fan noise is pretty loud, so you're getting a lot more engine noise on the Airbus than you are on the tail-mounted engine airplanes. But otherwise, a very very nice airplane, very comfortable. The automation worked very well. The automation flew the airplane very, very smoothly. So I was impressed. I don't know if it impressed me enough to want to fly the airplane, but I don't have any bad feelings about it anyway from my experience on it. So there you go. Thanks, Oliver, again for chiming in with some feedback regarding the Airbus. Okay, this is from Lee Tierney in Sydney. Let's see, I'm from Sydney, Australia. I've just started listening to your YouTube broadcasts. I'm a private pilot and have been flying since I was 15. I'm now 32. Unfortunately, I work in the finance industry and not in aviation, but listening to your channel as I work really helps. There aren't many people to talk about aviation in my industry. Just as a hobby, I have recently started training in the Boeing 737 New Generation Simulator here in Sydney. It's a great experience and a lot of fun. I have added a link into the message if anyone is interested. So I'm not sure which episode he sent his comment into or his like, but just go to the YouTube page, and I should probably put a link somewhere on my website directly to my YouTube channel. But if you go onto YouTube, just do a search for Airline. I think it's youtube.com/user/Airline Pilot Guy, all one word, and you'll see my YouTube channel. Look for Lee's comment or like, and he'll have some information there about the Boeing 737 New Generation Simulator that he flies. And he also left a URL here, the Sydney Flight Experience, and I'll have that in the show notes if anybody wants to check that out. Now, I know I've had questions from others in the past regarding Can you rent simulator time if you're not, an employee of an airline and that kind of thing? And well, apparently you can in Sydney. And I'm assuming, and I think we've received some feedback from folks in Hong Kong as well that say that they have these kind of things as well. So it'd be interesting to find out how expensive this is. And of course, Lee is working in the finance industry, so he's probably loaded with dough. So, money is no object for Lee. Here's a great picture of Lee as well that he sent along in his email feedback. And it's pretty cool. He's wearing, I thought for sure, Lee, that you were actually working for an airline because you're wearing an airline pilot uniform. I'm wondering, is that something that they supply for you when you go through their training, or is that something you got on your own? Just interested to hear what you say about that. And you look really sharp in that uniform, sir. So thanks for your feedback, sir, and also your contribution to my coffee fund. I do appreciate it. Okay, Joe from Prescott sent me some audio feedback. So let's listen and hear from Joe from Prescott.
Hey, Captain Jeff. This is Joe from Prescott. In episode 70, we were talking about headsets. Bose actually has not a lot of people know about it, but if you go on the Bose website, if you wanted to get the 820 headsets, they actually do offer a payment plan, and that's how I was actually able to purchase the very expensive 10s and now the 820s. You go on to the Bose website when you check out, they have a payment plan option. I think you pay about $250 down, and then you pay, I think it's $100. There's two options. There's a 6-month option and a 12-month option. You basically just pay the money down, and then it's no interest. They just charge your credit card every month, and they send you the headsets, and then you don't have to. It's a little bit less pain on your wallet, I guess you could say, and it actually works out good. I think 12 months, and you don't barely notice it. $100 comes out of your card, and then you got the 820s. Just wanted to let you know that if any of your listeners wanted to get headsets, that's also an option. I always tell my students and my friends too when they're talking about headsets that Bose does offer that option. So thanks for your podcast, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Well, thanks, Joe, for your feedback. And you know what? If you were watching the video, as I was playing Joe's feedback, I grabbed my Bose headset 10, aviation headset, and put it on. And I bought that back in 1999, I think, when I checked out as a captain on the 727. And I'm still using it today. I used it today. And it still works great. I've sent it back to Bose a few times because of a design flaw in the yoke on either side of one of the on the right ear cup. They have a wire trace in there, and there's a weak point. And I was putting it in my flight kit. It has a soft side bag, so it wasn't really being protected very well. And many trips worth of van drivers throwing the flight kits into the back of the van and bunch of suitcases on top of it. Then occasionally it would break, and then I'd send it to Bose. Bose is a great company, by the way. You send your headset back, and they every time I did, they fixed it for free. Put a new one on. Sometimes replacing the ear cup pads, replacing all kinds of different things on it. The little windscreen, the foam windscreen on the microphone. Great company, and then they'd send it back. So they'd always do it for free. Of course, now a lot of people would say, okay, well, yeah, you spent $1,000 on the darn thing. They better do it for free if it breaks. But you know what? I don't really think, after a couple of years, I don't think that they really were obligated to do that, and they did it. So I have very, very high, a very, very good impression of the company, Bose, as far as headsets are concerned. And I purchased that headset back in 1999 on the same plan that you're talking about, or something very similar. I believe at that time, I think it's anytime you buy anything from Bose that's at least $300 or so, they offer that payment plan where you can extend the payments interest-free for a certain amount of time. And I don't even think I had to put down any, maybe I did put down some money, but it seems to me that I just signed up for that financial incentive and that payment plan, and I received the headset in the mail, and I think my credit card was charged like $85 every month. And as you said, Joe, you hardly even notice it being charged on your credit card, and before you know it, a year goes by and that thing is all mine, all paid for, and I love that. Great plan. And it didn't make it feel like you were shelling out $1,000 for a high-quality aviation headset. And who knows, maybe I'll do the same when it's time for me to replace this thing. I mentioned before that it's starting to get some crackly sounds, and you know how I feel about that, and in the microphone. And so it may be time for me to replace my headset. If I stick with Bose, and it's likely that I will, and I'll probably buy the new A20, I will definitely use that financing plan. Thank you for reminding me of that, Joe, and anybody else out there listening who flies anywhere from the airlines to general aviation. If you're looking for a headset, especially a noise reduction headset, you can't beat the Bose, and their payment plan makes it even better. All right, let's move on with the feedback. This from Alex in Hong Kong, and he has a question about critical engines in crosswinds. Let's hear what he has to say.
Hi, Captain Jeff. My name is Alex. I am one of your listeners from Hong Kong. And recently I have come across a question while I was studying for the cadet pilot program interview. And the question is like this. On the Hercules, if you were to have an engine failure between V1 and VR, and you had a maximum crosswind, which engine would be the best to use? And I did a little bit of research online. Some people say that the upwind engine would be the best to use, but I've also come across some people saying that the upwind engine is the critical engine. So I am quite confused. And I would really appreciate it if you could answer my question. So I thank you ahead, and thank you very much for your podcast. I always take notes while I was listening to your podcast, and I've learned a lot. Thank you very much again. I wish you happy flying.
Well, thank you, sir, for your feedback. And let me get the levels up here. Your feedback was really high volume. So let me get back to where we should be here so you can hear me. And we get to normal levels. There we go. Okay. Thanks for your audio feedback, Alex, about critical engines. And, you know, I don't ever recall reading about this or even having this conversation in all my years and years of flying jets and training programs and in the simulator. You know, we practice V1 cuts and that kind of thing. And I think that they never use more than 10 or 15 knots of wind, crosswind, when we're practicing these things in the simulator. So a strong crosswind was never something that I had to even think about. But I'm glad you mentioned it, because I think I should be thinking about this. And so I did a little research myself regarding critical engines and engine failures. And as you said, there are different trains of thought regarding this, but I think it just makes sense to me when you posed the question. I thought, well, the critical engine should be the upwind engine, and the reason for that is that when you have a crosswind, most jet aircraft have a tendency to weathercock or weather vane into the wind during a crosswind takeoff. So let's say you're taking off and you have a right crosswind, and the nose of the airplane wants to go to the right, to kind of weather vane or weathercock into the wind. Okay, so you don't want that to happen, because if you don't check that, you'll start veering off to the right of the runway, right? So you want to keep going straight down the runway and stay on the center line. So you offset that tendency for the airplane to weather vane into the wind by pressing opposite rudder. So in this case, we have a right crosswind. I'm rolling down the window with both engines. I'm rolling down the runway with both engines operating, and I want to use my left rudder to keep the fuselage lined up with the runway, to keep it going straight. Okay, now let's say that so you already have some left rudder in with this right crosswind. Okay, so now we lose a right engine, so that you have all the power coming from the left side and no power or very little power coming from the right side. And in that case, again, you'd want to use the opposite rudder to compensate for that loss of thrust on the right side. So you have a compounded situation, since you're already using rudder displacement to keep the airplane going straight down the runway, and now you've just lost the engine on the upwind engine, and now you may end up losing all the rudder authority that you have just to keep the airplane going down the center of the runway. And apparently, when airplanes are certified, they take this into account when they determine what the maximum crosswind is for that particular jet, because they know that you have to keep the airplane on the runway for as long as you can. And but they understand that if you have a pretty strong crosswind and you've lost an engine on the upwind side, that you're going to end up drifting toward that direction, toward the crosswind, and hopefully you'll be airborne before you leave the lateral confines of the runway. So, interesting question, and yes, this is something that people have discussed quite a bit, and something that they do take into account when they certify airplanes. And the answer is yes, the upwind engine is the critical engine. Thanks for your question, Sir Alex in Hong Kong, and keep listening and keep sending feedback. Now, we talked to Oliver earlier about, and now that I'm thinking about it, maybe Oliver's down in South America. Oliver, no, don't worry about it. I'll figure it out. But Oliver sent me some earlier feedback than the one that I just read, and he says it's about humility. He said, "You and many others have talked about the importance of maintaining flying skills, something that can either be lost or never attained if you come straight into airline flying. Until recently, I was always a competent and confident pilot. Prior to airline flying, I did many years flying a transport aircraft manually, to a high degree, I hope, without issue. I now fly an Airbus from the left seat for he's in Europe, a low-cost airline in Europe. So I fly a great deal and occasionally into demanding airfields. I was recently in the sim and was given a triple IR failure, inertial reference platform failure. Therefore, I had to fly the aircraft manually using the standby horizontal situation indicator, the HSI, and the standby compass. Ooh, that's tough. I was embarrassed by my ability to fly the aircraft well. I didn't. My scan was very poor and raised the, then his email stopped there, but then he wrote back and said, well, my point was that we need to keep flying. Basic scan, alternate scan. Safe flying, Oliver. And you are so right, Oliver. You know, it's so easy for us to just fixate on the primary flight displays that are all nice and big and always work, and to kind of ignore those standby instruments that we have, probably located somewhere in the center panel, usually very small, usually the old steam gauges, although some standby instrumentation is electronic, just using a separate bus, an emergency bus. electrical bus. And it's hard, it's easy to ignore the fact that those things are even there. And I try as much as I can to keep my scan looking over at my standby instrumentation as well, so that if that day comes when I've lost all my inertial reference platforms and we've lost both sides of the electronic flight information system displays, that when I stare at those standby instruments, that I'll have some idea of what they're trying to tell me. So that's a good point. Thank you very much, Oliver, for having the professional courtesy to admit that that's something that you didn't do very well and that you need to concentrate on. And humility is always a good thing when it comes to flying high-performance airplanes, that's for sure. So thank you again for your feedback and for being a listener of the Airline Pilot Guy. Oh, if you're watching the video, you're going, why did he just clap? Trying to make a waveform mark for editing. Let's see, it just helps me. How are we doing here? We're already into this away. Oh, did I end up stopping the recording? No, okay. It's almost 7 o'clock. I think I need to go get something to eat. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and the audio for now, and I'll be back. Okay, I am back from a quick bite to eat. Had a flatbread pizza from the restaurant here. They give us a nice discount, 50%. It's pretty good. And I am ready to continue, and hopefully I'll be able to do a little bit more, and then I'll have to stop because I have to get to some sleep for my trip tomorrow. So let's hit the record button.
Hey, Captain Jeff, this is Matt Walsh up in Boston. I love the podcast. I have two quick questions for you. One is there any sort of kind of holy grail airplane among airline pilots that everyone wants to fly? Something, for lack of a better term, something like the Cadillac of the skies that you all aspire to fly, or something out there that airline pilots really want to have a chance to fly, but not everyone might be able to. Is there any sort of make or type or model out there that really everyone wishes they were flying if all things were equal? My second question is, on your off days, do you do any general aviation type of flying? I know in the past podcast you had said that after you got your license, you took your parents for a flight in a small, I think it was 152 or 172. But I would think one of the beauties of having your private pilot's license is the ability to go wherever you want, whenever you want. I know up here in Massachusetts, a lot of the general aviation pilots will, take a day and fly over to Nantucket or Martha's Vineyard or maybe Cape Cod for lunch, or up to New Hampshire for the day. I would think that would be, a pretty desirable thing to want to do. I'm not a pilot myself, but I would think that would be one of the real advantages. Or is it the type of thing when you're at home, you've been flying all week, you have no desire to go out and fly during your downtime? But I don't believe I've heard you talk much about any general aviation type of flying that you might do. So that's my question to you. I really enjoy the podcast. I look forward to hearing your answer, and keep up the great work. Clear skies and safe flying. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Matt, for your feedback and great questions. And first of all, I'll answer the latter part of your questioning regarding general aviation flying. And I had imagined that when I was, before I was an airline pilot, before, when I was in high school or whatever, I kind of pictured myself being an airline pilot and then, flying or having my own airplane, doing a lot of general aviation flying, as you mentioned, going to Martha's Vineyard and whatever. And the reality is that I fly so much now that I have so little time off that I don't really, number one, have the time, and number two, have the money to engage in private general aviation flying. Although I kind of do see that in the future, because right now I'm paying for college tuition for my kids, and I still have one in high school, and she hasn't gone off to college yet, and she'll be in college for at least 4 or 5 years, maybe more. And so I can see tuition is going to be one of the priorities for me for the next several years. And time, time is really, that's almost more important than the money part of it. It's just, I don't have a heck of a lot of time to do all the things I need to do when I get home, like, mow the lawn and do some of the things around the house that need to be done before I'm back out again. So, unfortunately, just don't have the time or the money to do the general aviation thing. But again, hopefully in the next, I don't know, maybe when I retire, I'll do that, because I'm sure that I'll miss the thrill of flying. The first question about the Holy Grail or the Cadillac of airplanes that guys want to fly, guys and girls. The only one that I really hear, now this is before the Concorde ended up getting retired after 9/11. What was it, 2003, something like that, when they finally decided to put the Concorde to rest. That was one of the airplanes that I do remember having people mention that they'd want to fly. But other than the Concorde, the top airplane that I hear most people saying when they see it, oh, I hope I get to fly that someday, is the 747, the Whale. That is just like the classic, the one airplane that I know for sure that I want to fly before I retire, if I have the chance. And everybody I've talked to, everybody I've flown with, yeah, that'd be really cool to fly the 747. You'd think that the Airbus 380 would be one that everybody would say, oh yeah, that's definitely on my list. That's the one I want to fly before I give it hang the whole thing up. I've never heard anybody say that. I have no desire to fly the Airbus 380. Now, maybe it's because I fly with people that aren't Airbus pilots. Maybe you out there who fly the Airbus 300 series, the 320s, 319s, 321s, 330s, maybe the Airbus 380 is high up on your list, maybe higher than the Boeing 747. I don't know. If that's the case, let me know. But all the people that I've flown with, nobody ever mentions the Airbus 380 Super Jumbo. It's always the 747 and the Concorde. But again, as I mentioned, that's not an option anymore. And yeah, that's what I'd say. That's my answer. So thank you, Matt, for your feedback, and keep listening, keep sending feedback. Okay, let's go over here and see what other feedback we have here. Okay. This is from William. Looks like you're recording this in a ladies' changing room. Oh, he's talking about my episode number 71, 2 episodes ago. I started out in a room, one of the agents' break rooms, and they had a room where they change and put makeup on and hairspray and that kind of thing. And yeah, you're right. I think it was a changing room. He says, I am in the UK and have heard every episode. Absolutely love them. Thanks. Turns a long journey into a pleasant experience. I would love to fly, but at age 68, have probably left it a bit late. In episode 70, there was a guy after a checklist for the Mad Dog. Yeah, he was a radio control guy, and he was looking for some audio of guys doing checklist procedures. Okay, continuing with William's feedback. There are plenty of examples on the web. The best I have found is, and then it's http freechecklists.net/resources/McDonnell plus Douglas/MD80. You know what? Just look for this link in my show notes, which is virtually a full manual. I can understand Acme not being over keen on you providing a copy of your cockpit check, but the checklists would give him the opportunity to record his own checklist with another person acting as co-pilot. Just a thought. Maybe it helps. Best wishes, and keep the blue side up and the record button depressed. Thank you, William. And yeah, that's a good idea. So check out the link that I will have or should have in the show notes, and look at the checklist procedures for the MD80. And as William says, you can get somebody to kind of be your co-pilot, and then you can go through the checklist, and that can be your audio for your RC events. Okay, let's see. Had this on one of the, I don't know what this was, I think it was from YouTube. I think somebody left a comment on YouTube. And he says, in response to the feedback question about military traffic using Tucson Airport with civilian traffic, check out one of my recent visits to Tucson, KTUS, and a 172, my 50-hour pilot in command flight. Controllers working both VHF and UHF frequencies, but I could not hear the pilots on UHF. As a pilot from the UK, flying in the US is just amazing. And I'm sorry, I think was this Neil Braden? I think so. I didn't mark that down when I pulled this feedback off the website, but he has a great website, a blog, kind of cataloging, or that's not the word, logging or whatever, his journey to get 100 hours pilot in command. And I watched his a video of him going into Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, and he left a link to his flight into Tucson. And yeah, that's one of the things I didn't mention when we were talking about joint use fields. The military in general use UHF frequencies, a higher, ultra high frequency range, which is higher than the VHF, very high range. And those frequencies are in the like 255 point something rather, and up. I don't know exactly where it starts, but a higher frequency range than the VHF. And so sometimes when we're flying, we'll hear air traffic control broadcasting information, communication to military aircraft, and they're on a UHF frequency. So we hear the controller talking to the military traffic on our frequency, but we never hear the military traffic talking back because they're on a different frequency. So that is one of the differences that you'll find when you're flying into a joint use field. Thank you very much, Neil, I think. And this from Josh Chambliss, living in Nashville. I think he was in Birmingham for a while, but I think he's in Nashville now. He has been a regular contributor to the Airline Pilot Guy from the very beginning. He works in audio and in concerts and that kind of thing. And he says he's doing a show at the Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles. Had a local guy give me a tour and share some of the history here. A bit of an interesting aviation story unfolded as I noticed a string of posters on the wall. Hollywood Bowl sits in the flight path for Burbank Bob Hope Airport, and since it's the home of the LA Philharmonic, having planes fly overhead during concerts is less than ideal. In the late 40s, the Hollywood Bowl installed lights over the venue, creating an X over the bowl to signal to pilots not to fly overhead because of an event. Between that, a period of bribes, a rotating set of 16 tickets going through the tower at Burbank apparently, and finally getting the FAA on board, the bowl has managed to keep the airspace overhead quiet for countless performances over the years. The lights are still activated when there's an event. Attached are some photos I took of the posters created by the LA Philharmonic over the years and posted at the Burbank Airport over the years, and the lights overhead tonight. I found this an interesting intersection between aviation and my day job. And so he has a series of photos that he took, posters warning pilots to stay away from the Hollywood Bowl, some of them very, very clever, and very interesting intersection of aviation and the Hollywood Bowl. Thank you, Josh. Dear Captain Jeff, after your appearance on the Airplane Geeks, I started following your podcast, and I'm really enjoying each episode. And as a priest, I was delighted to learn that your podcast began with a faith perspective. Very cool. Well, thanks. I grew up in the generation who first cut their cinematic teeth on movies like Top Gun. After watching, of course, I knew I was destined to be an Air Force or Navy fighter pilot. Life has a way of mitigating such dreams, but I've always loved the world of aviation, even working on a private pilot license in my spare time. One of the things I enjoy doing most is ministering to people who are afraid of flying while we are actually in flight. I like answering their questions and explaining the ins and outs of the various phases of flight. I've found that when people have some knowledge of what's going on, they fear it less. Well, I was sitting with one such person yesterday on a flight from Atlanta to West Palm Beach in a 757. We hit some moderate turbulence while flying over a tropical storm, Andrea, and so I shared with the fearful flyer about what can cause turbulence and its effects on aircraft. But she asked me a good question that I couldn't answer, so I figured I'd fumble the ball into your court. She asked if there could ever be a cross-current of air or a crosswind acting strongly enough upon the surface of the vertical stabilizer so as to force the aircraft to roll in the longitudinal axis and or yaw in the normal axis beyond normal parameters of flight. That was her concern. My concern was momentary loss of scotch from my glass, hoping it would land within the parameters of my glass again. Yes, yours was the more important concern, I think. Thank you for the wonderful podcast. Every blessing to you, Father Jeremiah. Well, thank you, Father, for listening and for asking the question and being out there to help people with their fear of flying. As I mentioned in previous podcasts, I think that a very large number of people have a certain level of anxiety, from maybe slight anxiety to very, very extreme anxiety. And one of the things that really bothers people is turbulence. And, for good reason. If you don't really know what's causing the airplane to do really weird motions, that is a little disturbing. Now, to her question regarding could there be a cross current or a crosswind strong enough to hit the vertical stab to twist or turn the airplane like that? No, in a word, no. It's just the aerodynamics of the airplane and the way that the crosswind is acting upon the airplane is not, the vertical stabilizer is not something that is so susceptible to that kind of an action to turn the airplane on the longitudinal axis. That's at least in my opinion. Now, those of you out there who have technical degrees in aerodynamics. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe you could send me some feedback and chime in regarding that. But my gut feeling is that no, that and remember that when you're up there in a crosswind, it's pretty much a steady flow of air. It's not like you're going to be going along in calm and all of a sudden get hit by a 50-knot gust of wind. Like that would be a pretty extreme wind shear. But I don't think that the action of the air against the vertical stab is going to force the aircraft to roll or yaw beyond the normal parameters of flight. But was a good question. At least she was thinking about things such as that. And Father, thank you for listening and continue to listen and send feedback. That'd be great. Okay, and speaking of turbulence, this is from J+. So I'm guessing this must be from Jay in Salt Lake City? Not sure. Sorry about this. I meant to add this onto the last email. However, I sort of forgot. Have you ever experienced severe turbulence and crosswinds when flying into Reagan International? Or is it just me? Do pilots have to be specifically certified to fly into that airport? First question. Have I ever experienced severe turbulence and crosswinds when flying into Reagan? No. Must be just you. You have to be careful about using severe. I hear people use that word when I'm not always sure that that's the best way to characterize turbulence. I think what most people would consider severe turbulence is really moderate. The definition of moderate would be the aircraft being hard to control, definite strains against your seat belt and shoulder harnesses. If you have a cup of coffee or anything that's not tied down, it might be flying off your tray table, that kind of thing. As far as we're concerned in the cockpit, when we're looking at our engine instruments, and they're hard to even read what the display is trying to tell you, that's moderate turbulence. Severe turbulence is when you basically have lost control of the airplane. You are basically holding on for dear life. And I've only experienced that once or twice in my career, where I knew that whatever I was doing, whatever control inputs that I was putting into the airplane, they weren't having any effect, and I was just basically along for the ride. I was just doing my best to keep the airplane straight up and down as best I could. I didn't care about whether I was losing altitude. I didn't care about anything but keeping the airplane from just completely rolling out of the sky. That is severe turbulence. So I've had some strong turbulence and strong winds going into Reagan, but never severe, no. And then the second question he asks, do pilots have to be specifically certified to fly into that airport? Yes. Well, at least for Acme. We have a list of special qualification airports. Washington, D.C. is one, mainly because of the prohibited airspace P-56 around the White House and the Capitol and the mall. Airports like Birmingham is one, believe it or not. High terrain around the airport. It's kind of in a hole. That's a special airport qualification required to fly into there. San Diego, another one. Several here in the domestic United States. And obviously several around the world internationally. Tegucigalpa is a good example of one where you have to be qualified to fly it. In that case, I believe you have to be actually go in there with a qualified instructor who is specifically authorized to basically show you what it's like to fly that approach. Most of these special airports are, you get your qualification by flying it in with somebody who is already qualified, or by looking at the special information about the airport and pictures and slides and that kind of thing on the computer. But yeah, we do have certain airports that require special certification to fly into, and DCA, yes, is one of those airports. Thank you again, sir, for your feedback. Liz in Washington. She said, I saw the story about an airline in China. I was going to share it with you just for the headline. Read to the very end, surprising alternative ending. And this is from, oh, no, I didn't mean to click on that. Now we're going to have to open up the browser. Apparently, this was supposedly a hijacking on a Chinese airplane. And I'm vamping now to wait for my browser to open. No, it didn't. Okay. Let me see if I can find it on my iPad. Very close. Okay, Liz from Washington sends this in. I saw a story about an airline in China. I was going to share it with you just for the headline. Read to the very end, surprising alternative ending. Okay, this is in the Atlantic Wire, and the title or the headline is, It Pays to Stop a Hijacking in China. So the story starts. The rewards for heroically foiling a hijacking attempt are many and fleeting, from fame to gratitude to hero status. But in China, there's more. Cash, apartments, and cars. In the U.S., becoming a hero by averting a disaster can lead to a role as a public speaker and author if you play your cards right, as Captain Chesley Sullenberger did after successfully landing a U.S. Airways plane on the Hudson River in 2009. But in China, the rewards are a little more immediate. When a group of ethnic minority Uyghurs, not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, who have historically clashed with China's majority Hans, reportedly tried hijacking a plane in the country's far west region of Xinjiang on June 29th of last year, I guess, the flight crew and passengers overpowered them. To thank them for the reported terrorist subduers for their efforts, the Hainan airline and government made their appreciation clear. Per the Associated Press, the official Xinhua news agency reported late Monday that Hainan Airlines, the parent company of the flight operator, awarded the chief flight attendant and 2 security guards 1 million yuan, that's about $159,000 in U.S. cash, an apartment worth $3,477,000, and a car. The other 6 members each received 500,000 yuan in cash, a 2 million yuan apartment, and a car. All 22 passengers on the flight will receive free lifetime airfare from the airline. Let's see. Of course, or in addition, the Civil Aviation Administration gave the crew 1 million yuan, or basically $160,000. And the Xinjiang regional government tossed in another $500,000, about $80,000, to be divided among them as well, and another $16,000 each for the 10 crew members and the passengers. Not to be outdone, the Hainan provincial government, where the airline is headquartered, gave the crew 500,000 yuan to split, and $100,000 yuan each to the 2 security guards. Of course, as is often the case in China, the story isn't as cut and dry as the state media would like it to be. The German-based World Uyghur Congress said shortly after the brawl, after which 2 of the alleged hijackers died, that the hijacking attempt wasn't any such thing, but rather a fight over a seat assignment. If that's true, then all that money starts looking less like a reward and more like hush money. Very interesting. Sounds to me, Liz, that at least the gist of this article is that it really wasn't a hijacking. It was some kind of an argument over seat assignments, and 2 people died, and the airline is trying to keep the story under wraps. That's the way I read it anyway. Is that the way you do? Very interesting. Thanks, Liz, as always, for your feedback. This is from Jonathan, and he says, I'm a newish listener and really enjoy your show. I have one bit of feedback for the Airline Pilot Guy number 71 Joint Use Field ATC controller discussion, and also a question. Feedback first. Most every Air Force and Joint Use Field use a combination of military and civilian controllers. Many Air Force controllers are relatively inexperienced and receive the majority of their training on the job at active towers around the world, both at military and joint use fields. Their initial training takes place at Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi, but the only way to learn to control is at operational towers. Once out of Keesler, these new controllers are under the supervision of experienced military and civilian controllers who give them the rest of their training and certify them as qualified ATC controllers. Since military folks move a lot, civilian controllers are also the continuity at many of our bases and joint use fields. So regardless if your landing is at VPS, joint use, or a military-only Air Force base, you could be talking to a civilian or a military controller. Okay, thanks for that clarification, sir, Jonathan. Now my question. I'm an Air Force pilot who, like many, are deciding whether to continue flying for the military or to transition to the airlines when my commitment is up. I've deployed 6 times in my 8 years in the service and would like to give more of my time to my family, and I see my kids grow up. I'd love to hear your take on the military to airline transition, since you went through it, and also any advice you have for military pilots like myself who are going through this debate. If possible, could you also talk about family life as an airline pilot, the rules on living near your home base or deadheading, and if getting a type rating on top of an ATP is worth it if the hiring in the hiring process? Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Hope the feedback helped, and thank you for investing so much of your time making this quality broadcast. If you're ever at VPS or overnighting in the Panhandle, I'd love to get together. Jonathan. Yeah, count on it, man. Thank you for your feedback. Appreciate that clarification about joint use fields. Now, regarding your decision whether to continue flying for the military or to transition to the airlines when your commitment is up, I'm under the impression that your commitment is quite a long one. I think that for me, it was 6 years after I got my wings. So if you add my 1 year of pilot training, my 3 months, 4 months of officer training school, I had a total of maybe 7.5 years of investment in the Air Force. And as you know, 20 years, that's not even halfway. It's maybe a little over a third of the way to that magic 20 years for retirement in the military. The military got smart and said, you know what, we're losing a lot of guys to the airlines, so let's see if we can't stem that number of folks that are leaving. And they decided to increase the commitment. And as far as I know, now Jonathan, you know for sure because you're in there, after you get your wings, I think your commitment is something like 10 years. So if you add your time in pilot training and everything else, you're already on the backside of the hump. You're already more than halfway to retirement in the military. Now, when I got out of the military, I thought, I could have stayed in the reserves or the Guard, and I'm thinking, I'm not sure that the time commitment is worth the amount of money I'm going to get for retirement, etc. And so I decided not to get actively involved in the reserves or the Guard. And in hindsight, I kind of wish I had, because the folks that I fly with who are in the reserve or guard units or have retired from them now have the capability of getting, health care benefits and a little bit of money for their retirement. And, at first I thought it wasn't worth the time commitment to get that. But now I'm thinking that was kind of a smart thing for them to do. So if you look at the pay in the airline pilot world with the pay that you're getting right now, it's not, you can't really compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. It's more of like an apple to an orange thing. You get a lot of things provided to you that doesn't come out straight as, a paycheck compensation. The BX, the commissary, tax advantages that you have being a military officer, etc. They all add up. And I'm not sure that if I were in your shoes, if I'd want to leave that and fly for the airlines. And the other thing to consider, the retirement age now is 65. When I was hired back in 1988, the end of 88, the retirement age was 60, and the whole front row of my initial pilot training class at Acme, there were about 30-something of us in our class. The whole front row were military retirees, and they only they were about 40, 42, 43 years old. So they had a good 16, 17, 18 years left before they had to retire back then. Now the retirement age is 65. So you might want to consider staying in the military if you can for at least your 20 years. So you get out and you're in your early 40s, and you still have another 20 years plus available in your flying career to do it in the airlines. The downside, of course, as everybody knows who flies in the airlines, is that everything is based on seniority. The earlier you get your foot into the door and you get your seniority, the better your career is going to be in the airlines. So that's another thing to consider. I'd play it by ear right now. We're supposed to be experiencing a pilot shortage in the next 3 to 5 years. It might be a good time to get out and get your seniority and get in with the airlines. Or it may not be. We'll just have to play it by ear, I guess. And now regarding family life, living near your home base or deadheading and that kind of thing. Family life, that's a tough one. It really depends on your relationship with your wife, how dependent or independent she is, your relationship with your family. I'll be honest with you. It's not perfect. We do spend a lot of, if you're flying the line, as I am, you spend a lot of time away from your family. Take, for instance, this week. Of course, I was gone in California visiting my family out in California. So I came back, got to spend a short amount of time with my family before I left on my trip on Tuesday. And essentially, I've been gone. Well, I was home Wednesday night, but I've been gone Tuesday night, tonight, and I'll be back on Friday. Who knows? I might end up flying some more over the weekend. It takes you away. And at first you think, well, it's not a lot of time away from my family. But then when you add it up, it does add up. So there are ways to mitigate that. You could fly, if you're senior enough, you could fly shorter trips, turnarounds, so you're not home, away from home every night. You could volunteer to work in the training department if your airline allows that kind of thing. There are ways to kind of mitigate, being away from home. But again, it depends on the individual. It depends on the relationship that individual has with their spouse and their family, the support system around that. If you have a good relationship, no problem. If it's tenuous, you may consider staying in the military and then perhaps revisiting the idea of flying for the airlines later. So my whole point is that one of the downsides of doing this as your career, as flying for a living, flying the line, is that no matter how you want to sugarcoat it, you are away from your family, and it could have a negative impact on it. And that is not something that you should take lightly. Speaking from personal experience. Got to really think about that. What's important? What are your priorities? Good questions, though. Any of you professional pilots out there listening, I'd like to hear your take on that. Thanks, Jonathan. Next time I'm in the Panhandle, I'll give you a call. Know some other people there. Scott Breimer, if you're still listening. I intend to get together with you as well one of these days. PJ writes, your listener from Houston. Been a while. You miss me? Yes. Been catching up on my podcast listening, and I thought I'd send this feedback regarding some of your episodes I've heard recently. I'm still a bit behind. So sorry if my points have already been addressed by others in more recent episodes. And also sorry for poor quality of my recording. Was using the voice memo app on my iPhone. I'm sure it sounds fine. And so let's check it out. Let's see how PJ sounds with his voice feedback. Do I have your voice feedback, PJ? I think I do.
Hey, Captain Jeff. It's PJ, your listener here in Houston, Texas. Just calling in. It's been a long time. I've been kind of behind on podcasts because I got a new job. Don't have the commute anymore to listen to those podcasts, but been making a big effort over the past few weeks to try to catch up and really been enjoying listening to your podcasts and other podcasts and your appearances in other podcasts and all kinds of great things. So all good stuff. Hey, just finished episode 66, so I'm still a couple months behind here, but I do want to give some feedback here about a few issues that you've discussed recently. First off, the hacking issue that you mentioned in episode 65, where the hacker claimed that he could take over an airliner's FMS with an Android phone and cause it to divert or crash. Well, I agree with you with my limited knowledge and experience, direct experience with FMS systems, that they couldn't really do it by taking over the FMS and forcing the airplane to change altitude or direction without the pilot giving the execute command. My concern and my counter argument would be that they could spoof the data being fed into and out of the ADS-B box on the airplane that's feeding the data into position and altitude data into the FMS, thus causing the FMS to think that the airplane is in a place that it is not, or that it is an altitude that it's not, and causing it to quote-unquote make corrections and therefore cause issues. A recent example of this is the drone aircraft that was hacked and captured by the Iranians when they were able to spoof the GPS position and cause the airplane to think it was somewhere it was not, and then thereby cause it to fly into Iranian airspace and land at a different airport. ADS-B relies on GPS position data and also altitude encoding data from the aircraft's altimeters. If something were to happen that box could be hacked and false GPS position and altitude data could be fed into that box and thereby fed into the FMS, that could cause issues too. But regardless of that, your point still stands that any pilot worth his salt will be monitoring those systems closely. If they notice anything going wonky with the airplane, they'll be able to quickly click off the autopilot, take over, and revert over to VOR navigation in order to get the airplane safely to its destination by flying it by hand. Next thing I want to talk about was the kind of related to ADS-B is the WAS and LAWS question that your Seattle listener was asking about. The wide area augmentation system and local area augmentation system. Not sure that it really pertains much to airliners as of yet. I guess once they start using ADS-B, then that will become more prevalent there. But right now, it's a huge thing for GA aircraft. GA aircraft, if they have the proper extra antennas and the the GPS devices in this airplane have the right software on board, they can use this wide area augmentation signal, which is a ground-based signal that enhances the GPS position and altitude data, to basically make the position of the aircraft much more accurate, to within just a meter or two. This allows the aircraft to fly precision approaches into runways where there is no ground-based ILS equipment present. Right now, to fly a precision approach into a runway, the airport has to have a lateral equipment to provide lateral guidance and to provide vertical guidance to each runway. And since runways, can go two directions, that means they have to have two sets of these things for each runway going each way, and that gets rather expensive to install, maintain, and certify, and keep certified. Now with the WAAS, you don't need any of that ground-based stuff at the airport anymore. Now it's just done based on satellite data and this ground-based WAAS signal that that the airplane receives, and the same level of precision can be achieved using those signals as the airplane approaches the runway. So it opens up that ability to do precision approaches to many more runways at many more airports than was previously available. So hopefully that's something that'll occur in airliners pretty soon, and then some of these ILSs can be decommissioned and save the FAA some money for this sequester. But for right now, GA is seeing huge benefits from this. Let's see, what else did I want to talk about? ETOPS. Your listener talked about his concerns with ETOPS aircraft and the consequences for a rapid decompression where the airplane has to descend. They burn more fuel at lower altitudes, and he's concerned that they wouldn't have the range with those that increased fuel burn to make it to the airports that they're supposedly in range of. I would actually kind of argue the counterpoint that it's actually more dangerous to have a rapid decompression situation in a non-ETOPS aircraft on an ocean crossing, because my understanding is if you have a 3 or 4 engine airplane, you're not limited to doing a circle route where you have to be within so many hours flight of a airport. You can actually just do a straight line crossing. So you're further away from these airports. Now, if you have a rapid decompression in those aircraft, you're flying at a lower altitude, and instead of having 2 engines, now you have 3 or 4 engines burning fuel and decreasing your range. And that's actually, you have to cover more ground or more ocean, I guess, to get to. So that might be kind of a different point there too. So I might be interested to hear your thoughts on that. Anyway, that's all I had to say for right now. Feel free to kind of break this up if you need to. It's I know it's gone on for quite a while, but I can see now how your podcast can get to be so lengthy, and it's great stuff. I really appreciate it, really enjoy what you're doing, and please keep it up. Safe flying, blue skies, and please give me a shout if you're ever in the Houston area for a layover. Love to get together, give you some good Texas barbecue, and enjoy some of the IPAs at the one of the bitterest bars in America. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Oh, you're so bitter. The bitterest bar? I love that. And barbecue, my favorite. I love barbecue, especially Texas brisket. But that's another show. Thank you, PJ, for your feedback. Now, you tackled a 3 things regarding some of the earlier episodes and clarification. First of all, I could be wrong, but you talked about the ADS-B and spoofing and that kind of thing. As far as I know, the automatic dependent surveillance broadcast is not something that is fed or has anything to do with your FMS. There might be some aspects of it that your FMS system uses, but it's not anything that controls the flight management system. It's just basically a replacement technology for what we're using now, radar, ground-based radar to survey or surveillance for tracking aircraft. And in the next generation air transportation system, or next gen, they want to use ADS-B via satellites as opposed to ground-based radar technology to keep track of aircraft. But I could be wrong about this, and I even looked it up in several different places to see if there was any kind of a controlling aspect to ADS-B, and no, it's just a surveillance technology. So again, PJ, I could be wrong. Straighten me out if I'm wrong about this, but I don't think about your concern about, I know you talked about the drone, and in that case there may have been some kind of a connection, but the spoofing there was something that would actually control the drone to do something that you did not intend for it to do. But as far as general aviation and corporate aviation, airline aviation, ADS-B is just the way the FAA is going to, the technology it's going to use to surveil, or the surveillance technology to figure out where we are, and the technology we're going to use to see other aircraft instead of using the TCAS system. Again, I don't think it has any connection with the flight management system computer. Let's see, you talked about WAAS and WAAS, WAAS, Wide Area Augmentation System. I agree. It's a great way to give airports that don't have ILS systems the capability to do precision approaches, and in some cases even more precise than using an instrument landing system. And it's a great way, if they eventually ever implement this to the big airports, it's a great way to save some money as well. Good point about the WAAS system. ETOPS, your point about, you'd say that it's worse for a 3 or 4 engine aircraft to non-ETOPS aircraft to have a rapid decompression, etc. Well, even those airplanes are flight planned. I flew a 3-engine airplane for Acme that went routinely from the West Coast and sometimes all the way from Atlanta, but flew that segment from the West Coast of the United States to the Hawaiian Islands. And according to Mike, the dispatcher, that is the longest and most critical, ETOPS critical segment that any airline flies, is that West Coast to the Hawaiian Islands. And it's because there aren't any real alternatives or alternates for you to go to if you have a problem between California or the West Coast and the Hawaiian Island chain. And I remember this because in our flight planning, we would calculate equal time points and have places drawn out on our navigational charts depending on our route for that particular flight. If we have a problem here, we have a rapid decompression and engine loss, this is where we have to turn back around and go back to the West Coast. If we're beyond this point, then we continue to the Hawaiian Islands. And everything is planned. Fuel planning, fuel burns, all that kind of stuff is all planned on being able to have an episode like an engine failure and a rapid decompression and still either return to your origin or somewhere close to your origin the other way, or continue on to your destination. So I don't think that your concern is really valid, because 3 and 4 engine airplanes, this is already part of our or their calculations when they do these long routes. So good stuff though. Thanks, PJ. And again, I'll definitely give you a call, take you up on the IPAs and the Texas barbecue. Good stuff. Well, you know what? We've been going at it for quite some time. I'm making a dent in the feedback, and soon, very soon, I'll be all caught up. Let's see. Oh, you know what? Before I do that, let's do something a little funny. Matt Dolan sent me some feedback, and this has something to do with ATC communications. Let me see if I can find the sound file. This is San Francisco, a tower controller at the San Francisco International Airport, and apparently he's having a little physiological problem. Let's listen.
412, the wind is 2107, traffic approach 32 mile final, runway 1 left, clear for takeoff.
Cactus 412, we are clear for takeoff, 1 left.
Cactus 650 via Echo Cross from which your left contact ground. Thanks, sorry about that.
Okay, Echo clears to cross 28 left for Cactus 650. Try to line with bidders.
MX 1805, runway 1 left is slow.
1 left, on hold, MX 1805.
Okay, obviously, this man is suffering from hiccups. Let's hear a little bit more.
Tower, 761 is on the ILS to it right.
At 761, San Francisco Tower, number 2. Runway 28 right, clear down 12106.
Oh, and to it right, United 761.
Okay, thank you, Matt, for sending in that feedback. That's great. Edited it a little bit. It was quite a long audio file, but I got kind of the better parts of it. He goes on and on, trying to issue instructions and suffering through his, what is that, your diaphragm that is having a spasm, your muscle in your diaphragm that causes hiccups. But anyway, one of those flights, you could hear the other guy in the background laughing. So they were getting a kick out of the predicament that this controller was in with his hiccup episode. So anyway, with that, let me head over to my closing script and let you get on with your life. Remember, you too can send feedback. You can send it to feedback@Airline Pilot Guy. You can call my Google Voice number, 304-99-PILOT, 304-997-4568. Or you can send voicemail, as many of you did, using SpeakPipe on my website, airlinepilotguy.com. Let's see, on Facebook, I am Airline Pilot Guy. I have a page there. Twitter, Airline Pilot Guy, and Stitcher Radio. You can listen to me on that. If you have a smartphone, you have a plan where you can't use a lot of bandwidth, Stitcher is the way to go. It's less bandwidth than normal. You can listen to my show. You can listen to on-demand news, talk, and more. The latest episode is always available for you. No syncing needed. You just stream it. No memory or storage wasted. It's available for your iPhone, your iPad, Android phones, and more. Downloading is easy. Just go to stitcher.com/airlinepilot or check out your app store. Remember, Stitcher Smart Radio is the smarter way to listen to radio. Until next time, wishing you clear skies, unlimited visibility, and tailwinds. Take care, and God bless. All right. For those of you watching the video, thanks again for hanging out with me and looking at all the weird stuff that goes on. Hope you enjoyed the show. And again, if you want to listen to the audio podcast, head over to Airline Pilot Guy. Click on the iTunes link and you can subscribe there. It's free. So until next time, see ya.